This is Battlefield 1 run Xbox Series X, taking a look at the game that is now FPS boosted, starting with the single player and then showing off the multiplayer in action. So in order to enable this one with FPS boost, you actually have to go and manually turn on the setting under the My Games and Apps for the particular title, and doing so will actually lower the resolution. So what we're getting here is obviously 120 FPS if you have, the supporting 120 Hz screen at what should be 1080p, because it's a bit of a dynamic resolution scaling up to around that point. And with that, you do actually keep the HDR support, which is nice to have available for the title. It is a little bit disappointing to have such a decrease in visual fidelity in order to accomplish this, but having the 120 is really quite awesome in regards to making it feel, very fluid as a shooter. Now with that, personally, I think the 4K 60 option is a bit better of a choice. Keeping that higher resolution option is sort of the way to go, but you now have the option to have either of them, and I think that's kind of a cool choice, is that you can switch between them and kind of choose what you want to play. And like I said, they basically give you the selection that you have to actually manually turn on the 120. Keep in mind, if you are playing the game, you have to exit the game and then turn on the setting and then run the game, and then you'll have an FPS boost icon running in the guide menu. So that's kind of a cool way to, experience what this has to offer. And it's a nice feature to have, and I just kind of, it doesn't show up for you anyways, but it's just a nice feature to have available, is being able to jump up to 120 Hz, because I didn't think we would really see this for the Battlefield series from Xbox One titles, and yeah, now we're just able to easily experience what that has to offer, I guess, against most of them, actually. You can plop it on there, which is really cool. Yeah, just be prepared for quite a bit of a visual, downgrade in terms of like the sharpness and quality. And it's a really personal choice. I know a lot of people really love the frame rate, and playing Battlefield at 120 feels great. It seems to carry through to most of the cutscenes, just in terms of those being like kind of in-engine type things, most of them. I think at the beginning I wasn't quite sure about that one, just due to the way that it's all grainy and stuff, but I believe that one might be pre-rendered in that regard. But yeah, it just really is interesting to see these games running like this. I've been saying it for a couple of the FPS boosted experiences, but I just really never anticipated that we would see the shuffle, so many titles running like this. It wasn't, something I'd expected that long ago, but it seems like we're getting a good chunk of them. And I would compare this mode to being something like you would see in a regular optimized title, having the choice: do you want like 4K 60, or do you want like 1080 or 1440p at 120? Those are the choices you typically get for the optimized titles. So yeah, it's really interesting to see this particular option being present on these games that would, they would never go back and update these games typically, because they're so old. There's just not necessarily a real focus or a need for them to do so, I guess you could say, from a perspective of them, making money off these games. So that's kind of interesting. Now with that, let's shift gears. Let's get out of these tanks that are honestly quite awesome, and let's jump into the multiplayer, which I believe is the core focus of what most people like to see out of Battlefield titles. Although these war stories are kind of interesting, little slices of life of the Great War here. But yeah, let's jump on for some multiplayer combat. This is the multiplayer portion of the experience, and what I think kind of benefits the most from having this FPS boost. Single player is great, and it feels a lot better, but, multiplayer is where the competitive angle comes in, and it just sort of makes this one feel, definitely a lot better, which is nice. So some of the big differences that I notice when I jump into a higher frame rate experience is the fact that basically the elements of panning around, the accuracy you get, that's a lot better. You can kind of really sort of hit those marks. And I guess, again, 120 hertz, you can't really have that supported on YouTube. You can't film it and stuff. So I do hope that you can see the visual kind of difference just in regards to the smoothness of the camera angles and that as I'm sort of looking around. Now, obviously, this Battlefield's a little bit of a, I don't know how you describe it, a little bit chunkier in regards to the movement because it is, World War focused, so keep that in mind as we're moving around and stuff. It doesn't have the super fast fluidity of like the Battlefront titles when they're kind of futuristic space shooter things, but it still definitely feels really good, and it's quite a beautiful title. And that's again where I kind of come into the mention of like, is it worth it kind of degrading the visual elements of this experience in order to get some better fluidity, or do you want to kind of keep the visual elements and still get a pretty good fluidity? Because I think 4K 60 is still fine for this one, but obviously some people are going to want more out of it, and you now have, well, basically the choice to make there, which is kind of cool. So in general, if you're not familiar with Battlefield 1, obviously we're going to this Great War scenario. It's a very expansive and different style for the Battlefield series. You look at the campaign as being a collection of little smaller stories and narratives that you're engaging in with little standalone sections. So they're like little chunks and different, surprising stories. And I believe this was the first time they went and did that format, and they seem to have been carrying that forward in future Battlefield titles. So I think they kind of found something that works for them. I mean, I stabbed that guy. You think it would have maybe hurt him more, but anyways. Then you look at the multiplayer, really expansive. They tried to do some different things with like the objective type play in regards to, I can't believe I didn't kill that guy. Objective type play, because they've got these like grand operations, and they got these more like, I guess you could say breakthrough type elements where you're sort of pushing back and forth alongside the traditional sort of competitive modes that you might experience. But now you've just got like these grander campaigns. The idea is to get players, going around and doing stuff a little bit more, and I think these are still fairly popular today. You can seemingly find matches and stuff all the time of them. And of course, with that, there are different classes, and they've kind of adjusted, how these classes sort of play. Every Battlefield does some different things with their classes and how they handle. So keep that in mind as you try to find a spot that fits your particular style. And it's a very like gritty sort of war too. I mean, it's definitely got weapons and that from the capture of the era. I can't believe we died that fast. We lost? Oh, come on, guys. So we're continuing on with a different map scenario because, this is kind of a grand battle. So we go into a different area, which is this forest. And yeah, like I was saying, the multiplayer in this one, really intense, really gritty, crazy weapons, crazy battles. Lots of dynamics to the combat, whether you are doing more infantry-based experiences or kind of jumping in on various vehicles, aerial vehicles, armor-based kind of vehicles too, driving on the ground or squatting up and doing individual things. They offer a lot of different ways to, sort of battle and experience what the Battlefield has to offer, because that's the whole point of Battlefield is, kind of grand-scale combat, and doing so in big environments. So it actually is kind of nuts that this runs, 120 here, just considering, how big these games are. But yeah, the visual drop is definitely noticeable if you're coming from 4K, 60, what you'd be kind of used to playing on this one. It is a bit wild. I think the environment loses a lot of its like kind of color scale and everything too. It just seems less vast and less detailed. Although it does seem to kind of help smooth out some of the little like pop-in-esque things, but it's still not as vibrant and beautiful as it usually is. Because while it is a very gritty, dark kind of game, it does have some very luscious environments and varied biomes and stuff that you're fighting in. Obviously, we're in a forest now. Sometimes you get like a desert location, and they've got just such a range of different places that you go and you fight in. That's what the Battlefield series is all about, kind of providing authentic theaters of war from different eras, and Yeah, it's definitely a little bit disappointing to lose that. So I think, you know, for me, I might mostly focus for this one doing the 4K 60 option. And I know there's some like dynamic resolution things, and we're not talking about that because I don't have those off the top of my head. But you know, you can see my other Series X review of this game in action and get, you know, the full context there and seeing how it's looking at that point. Also, I'm thinking I'm going to be doing some comparisons of these two kind of back and forth, well, all the different Battlefield games, I suppose, so you can see the differences. But yeah, I hope you just get an idea of how it's running now, because it feels really, really good. That's the big thing, you know, it feels really gripping, and having the 120 where it's like the intense action going on and stuff, it just adds like another layering to the realism elements of it, and I think that's kind of wild. Because this game can just be absolutely crazy in terms of, you know, the combat, what you're doing. Oh, come on. It's going for the long run lunge on that one to go and bayonet him, but did not work. I think it's fairly authentic to its era in terms of at least some of the weapons and stuff that you do in this one. You got your squads, you got your battlefield action. The operations are really fun to play. I don't know. It's very straightforward sort of battlefield setup, right? I think a lot of people sort of know what to expect out of the series at this point, and this one's just kind of unique because of the era that it's set in and the great selection of, you know, maps and things that they provided with this one. Are we run it back? Oh geez. Yeah, I gotta say 120 for like effects and stuff definitely adds a lot to their movement and their level of quality. And I haven't noticed any sort of like issues popping up in regards to like environmental things. Sometimes when you look at these, you know, older titles with the FPS boosts, there's sometimes some little artifacting or something on some of the visual touches of the world, but it seems like Frostbite here is perfectly tuned for, you know, what this has to offer, these FPS boosts, and that's kind of really cool. It's just crazy to be doing, like, I'm basically just rolling through the battlefields here, kind of jumping through them and seeing how they're, you know, kind of performing with this update. Well, it's not even an update, it's just like an outside upgrade to the game where, again, the developers, if you didn't know that, they have nothing to do with these updates. It's completely Microsoft side, where they just kind of add a thing on top of them, and it's really, really quite marvelous if you think about it. Because there's not really been an era, gaming-wise, where other companies have done anything like this. Obviously, we're seeing resolution boosts on the One X. Now we're seeing them take that to a level higher with the frame rate boosts, because I think a lot of people do prefer frame rate over resolution in most situations, even though I tend to go more resolution, but, you know, it's a personal preference, right? And now you have those choices. You could go really high frame rate-wise, or you can keep that resolution and still have a pretty good frame rate. You're not really sacrificing anything, unless you want to have 120 and have all the, you know, the gleam of the high resolution at 120, which we're not quite there yet, I guess you could say. Not for every game, but hopefully more and more titles will embrace that over the generation, I guess. And maybe with the next console we'll be able to do, you know, a sort of, I guess, FPS boost and resolution boost or something. Get the best of both worlds in that regard. I mean, who knows, right? Technology could go any particular way, I guess you could say, with in regards to this sort of franchise or other franchises. And that's kind of exciting. I don't know, it's really fun to be able to have an excuse to go back and do gameplay on these types of titles. We were actually streaming this one and a lot of the other Battlefield titles not too long ago, and the thought didn't even cross my mind that eventually these would be given any sort of frame rate boost. It was a complete surprise to me that it just sort of popped up today. I was like, whoa, okay. That's nuts, because I've been, again, checking out a number of titles, seeing how it's running, and it seems like Frostbite is just perfectly set up for this. And that's fantastic, because who knows what other older titles might also be able to benefit from it. That would be really cool. Because again, when I look at this, it's like, do we need to have these 60 FPS titles jumping up to 120? You know, maybe I'd rather have some 30 FPS going up to 60, because I think that's, you know, quite a nice touch. But then I'm also like, you know, if they can do this, and they clearly can do it, you know, maybe we need to see even more titles kind of getting this support too, because I think it's a nice feature to have. It feels really good. You know, it really does make the games come alive quite a bit more, and it just adds a nice sort of touch to them that is just really hard to describe, I suppose you could say, if you haven't experienced what 120 is like. It just really adds like a fluidity feeling to it as you're moving around, you're fighting with others. It's really quite unreal, honestly. And I can't wait to see the total number that we end up with by the end of the generation. I think most people are actually going to be quite shocked by how many 120 hertz games we end up seeing here. And I think that's maybe even becoming more and more of an excuse for people to, you know, do a bit of a display upgrade, as to say, in regards to getting something that supports this. You know, you might look at it and be like, oh, there's not much title, or not many titles to support this, but now you're looking at it and like, whoa, there is a growing quantity of games that we can experience at this frame rate, and it feels nice. It feels really different. And you get all the other perks, like the game mode settings and stuff help out a lot too. But like I was saying, it's just, they're getting really, really intense technically, these games. That's the biggest thing. Oh, come on, let me get over the thing. Yeah, I'm dying. I'm stuck. I'm in like a glitch thing. Oh no. Oh, that was an awkward spot to be caught in. But yeah, this game is generally really good too. I want to get that across as well. I mean, we've been talking mostly about the technical aspect of how this is better, and you've gotten that across, I would hope, at this point. But the game itself is actually, yeah, quite well done from a historical standpoint and entertainment value-wise. You can have a lot of fun playing this. It seems like the servers are still, you know, quite healthy from what I've seen, despite it being quite a number of years. I'd say it's a little bit less popular at this point than Battlefield 4, even though that one's a little bit older. But this one still definitely seems to have a good supporting group jumping in here and playing it, so you shouldn't have any issues, you know, finding servers and stuff like that. Damn. Killed by Thor with his mighty hammer. This is quite a fun game. But hopefully you see a variety of different, you know, kind of maps and stuff when you go in and play it, because there is a number of really good, you know, campaigns and selections that you can actually jump into outside of just, you know, being in a forest right now. Or the last one was really cool. I was actually hoping we'd get to see more of that one, but the match ended pretty fast because the whole kind of tracks and battle there, that whole area is actually quite fascinating to see, like the structures all getting destroyed. Because that's the fun part of, you know, like DICE and their engine with Frostbite, is the fact that there's such high levels of like destructibility to the environment. You can just really smash things up to a high degree. And I know they don't have any fancy coined terms like they do with Levolution in Battlefield 4, but you can really carve into like like I was saying with the big sort of estate level that was the previous one. You can have whole pieces of like wall coming down. You can lose basically the structures that support you. And it's neat seeing that progression of places getting destroyed. Same with the forest, though. As they push us back, you know, you get more and more different environments as we go across. And you see we kind of move more towards like an open ruins there. And then when you really lose, you go like back to a town, and it's really quite neat. It's the progressional element of how this game mode is handled. And I think this is actually kind of a perfect design for the Battlefield concept. It just seems like a nice upgrade in succession almost to Conquest mode, which is obviously a hugely popular and staple game mode of the franchise. Just nice to have all of these details. I just wish we didn't have to lose all of the nice resolution quality that I've come to get used to with these games, because it looks good, don't get me wrong, but you know, on the 4K big screen, it definitely looks a lot better when the resolution is, you know, being pushed further and going a little bit more beyond just the basics of like even the early last gen kind of quality. So yeah, fun game, but yeah, it's neat to have those choices. So that's what I'm trying to get across. You get to really pick and choose now. High frame rate, go for it. Want resolution? Okay, that's fine. You don't have to sacrifice too much frame rate, but you want to really, really have that high level of fluid for competition stuff. Like if you're getting really serious competition-wise, you know, that's frame rate's going to be a bit of a bonus to you for sure, but you know, you can kind of have, I think, the fair balance of the 4K 60. It is nice to have choices, though. Down you go. Kind of crazy. But anyways, Battlefield 1.